would stand as we connect with our God in worship. There's no better way than to start this by singing to Him, sing praise to the greatness of our God. Let's worship Him. Amen. You may be seated.
I almost said good morning, huh? Yeah, almost. For those of you guys that are streaming online, I know we're trying to figure out the sound stuff. So we got it working? Sounds like it. Good. Hopefully you guys can all see and hear us real well. Thanks for being here. For those of you guys who are in here in person for Vision Night 2020 and what that looks like for us, as we've been saying these last few weeks, one of the things we're trying to do is just simply kind of look back, retrospective a little bit on what God has done through the church in 2020, but then also spend some time looking future-wise and what do we feel like God is what's the projection or the trajectory we feel like God is calling us into as a church family. So super glad that you're here this evening. I do have a couple things just to let you know. There's a couple of booklets that if you didn't pick up already out there in the lobby, there's a vision booklet that's got some information about all the various different ministries, as well as our treasurer's report. You want to grab that, you can have that, thumb through it, look at it, memorize it if you want to, and just spend some time in devotionals with it if you want. But the issue there is there's a ton of information, lots of good things to kind of go at there. So there's that. There's also cookies out there in the lobby, so feel free if you want to just get up in the middle and just kind of go over there and grab some cookies. There's coffee out there, and there's also more coffee. So if you got already your 1 cup, but you want a second, you're more than welcome to get up in the middle and go there. You're not going to offend me, because I may get some more as well. So good to have you, that kind of stuff. So make sure you have those booklets. Any kind of information would go there. We are going to have some time of Q&A throughout the night. So if you're online and you're having a question that's specifically a question you want us to address, we're going to try this. You can go ahead and type that in, and the guys back there will try and get me those questions if we can later on in the evening. And so we may not be direct right on it, but because there may be a delay in the broadcast. But if you have that, we can hopefully get those answered. We always start off these vision nights. It's a little different. Obviously, 2020 has been a different year for everything. But typically, if you've been around most of these vision nights, we have tables set up and opportunities for kids to draw on the butcher paper and us to kind of talk through about stuff and that kind of thing. So we set it up a little differently just to try and keep it in normal spaces and that kind of stuff as it is here. But we always start off with just kind of a retrospect of where did you see God at work in the church over this last year in 2020. Maybe it was early part, maybe it was in the middle, maybe it was just recently. And we all just kind of have a little bit of sharing time during that time. We did a little bit of this morning, but if there was something that you wanted to share that maybe you didn't get a chance to this morning, or maybe there's just something else that comes to your mind now as you're thinking back on 2020 and thinking about the various things that you feel like God has been speaking to you, teaching you, reminding you of. We always want to start off these nights with just kind of celebrating what God's doing in and through people. So we don't have mics tonight, so just shout it out, and then I'll repeat it for the people that are streaming online. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. That's great, Cheryl. Cheryl was saying that with all the temptation to feel down and negative and doom and gloom and like you're defeated, to be reminded to be actively looking for places to transmit hope or to be actively engaging in what God is doing. Is that a fair, succinct deal? Thanks, Cheryl. That's awesome. Something else, maybe it's that God has been teaching you this year that you want to remind us or guide us with. Hmm. Hmm. Awesome. Mm-hmm. That's good. Good. Deb was saying that it was a couple of weeks ago. She realized on Wednesday that she was singing a song in her mind, and couldn't figure out where that song came from, and finally realized that she had been on autoplay replaying the worship stuff from Sunday, and how the worship music on Sunday, if we allow it to stay with us, can have a shaping impact throughout our week as well. So it's an important discipline to be a part of. Thanks, Deb. That's good. Just a couple more. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think echoes for most of us that in the spring when all this stuff started hitting hard, just reminded how important this family is to us. Yeah, thank you. Maybe one more. Yes. Mm. Yeah, 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 it's good. Juana was just saying that excited about the book study that she's a part of, the half the church study that Katarina is leading, and she just said tons of wonderful things about Katarina, how fantastic she is, and how wonderful it is, and so it's all that. Um, so no, you're right. That's a fantastic book. So I'm excited for those of you who are in that group. It's a great book. It's a good read. It's worth reading a second or third time.
Hey, Brian. Back here.
Yes,
Hey,
Jake.
someone in our online community, Kendra Bermosk, just said, I'm just reminded that God is still good and that still sees us and is with us even in the midst of difficult times.
Yeah,
We have still been able to gather as a community, and he still provides peace even in the midst of it all.
yeah, that's
Peace
good.
isn't about our circumstances. It's about God being present in those times.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Kendra. That's awesome. Good. Any other was on there, Jake, before I move on to the next? Oh, sorry, Brooke. Gina, can you give me my iPad? Thank you. What? No, I know. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Brooke was just saying that there are all of those lots of challenges, even in the midst of it. Just family was able to celebrate lots of great things. Your wedding, Maddie's wedding coming up, the graduate schools and getting into schools and everything. Even in the midst of all the chaos, family's doing well. So that's a good. Praise God for that. Praise God for that. Awesome. Well, here's what I want to do. I want to give us a little bit of a snapshot of kind of culture or as a church family of what's gone on in the last year and where we've been and stuff. And then I'll take some questions after that for a little bit. Some of the stuff is written down in that packet. Pastor Jason, Pastor Jake, Andrea, who is our Learning Tree director, and myself, we've kind of put together a little like a synopsis, a little recap of the year. So you can read those at your leisure in that packet. But I want to kind of highlight just a couple things that have been going on in 2020, things that are happening. Obviously, the biggest change that has gone on is we've all been impacted by COVID-19 and how that's thrown a curveball at everybody from moving our services completely to be online in the spring and having some volunteers to come in and record those services. It feels like an eternity ago, if I could be honest with you. But we would sit in here and nobody would be in the room, and there'd be like 5 of us up on stage, and we'd have like 3 cameras, and we're trying our best to like record this service and try to edit it in the right way to make a smooth looking service, to make it somewhat plausible and all that stuff. So we did all that. And then we decided to move into just say, we're going to do this. When we gathered in person, we knew that there was going to be complications and people weren't going to be able to make it and that stuff. So we moved forward with having and creating an online campus, an online platform for people that cannot be here in the gathering here, but still can feel like they're a part of it and not feel like they're, off in the second hand kind of stuff. So we developed that, and to be honest, that's actually increased the reach of the church. There are people that cannot come and that haven't been able to come for some time, that because of this online campus, they're hearing the messages and they're experiencing the worship. And while admittedly it's not the same than if you're in the room, as we've already kind of talked about, it is increasing the reach and the impact that Crossroads can have. And so that's a positive thing that we can see, that while it's not something we necessarily would have done right away, it's something that we feel like God is leading the way and going there. So that's a good thing. We've been creative in finding ways to do life groups and other courses through Zoom, or making like a hybrid course. Wanda was mentioning half the church. There's a group that I'm a part of, the Cultural Learning Group that I'm a part of, is also a hybrid kind of a group where some of our group members are in person. We meet in the big room over here on Sunday nights typically, and then usually 4 or 5 people are meeting on Zoom, and they Zoom in. And so we have a TV, and you can see the person, and they can see us, and we can interact with them. And so we've been able to kind of harness some of the technology as best we can, and all the problems that go with that. But being able to have those groups be hybrid groups and be able to meet along the way, that's a really good thing. Again, I would say that increases the reach of what we would typically be able to do. If all we were able to do is say, we're going to have this group, whether it's a half the church or it's a cultural learning group or something else, and we said, well, you have to be here on campus, well, it limits the amount of people that can be here, that can be impacted by the ministry. And so while, again, all of us would agree that in-person interaction is better than watching somebody on a screen, for sure, but giving somebody on the screen, having somebody be there as well as have that option increases the ability to be interacting and be good from there. Not to put you guys on the spot, but Dave and Denise were contact traced, quarantined for a little bit. They're part of our cultural learning group. And instead of missing the group for a couple weeks because they had to be quarantined for that time, they were just able to Zoom in. And not that it's the exact same, but you're able to pick up and keep the ball rolling. So I think that's another positive thing that we're being able to see, that some of our stuff is able to continue even and go from there. So that's the deal. The third thing I'd say about 2020 is that we've actually ended the year, and this is just a honoring and praise to God, what He has done through the faithfulness and generosity of people. But we've actually ended this year, or we're projecting to end 2020 financially really healthy, really healthy. And again, that's just a testimony to what God has done. We've made adjustments, as everybody has had to do in 2020, to limit our expenses. We cut back on a whole lot of things. All the other stuff that we may have been wanting to do, we kind of slowed that down as much as we can to limit our expenses. But I want to show you a couple things that are just really telling to God's faithfulness, not just for 2020, but for God's faithfulness. And we just did this for the last 5 years. And I want to show you a couple of graphs. So if you want to show Doris that first graph, it should have these bar graphs. There you go. Online people, I hope that you guys can see this. I meant to get a laser pointer, and I'm really disappointed I don't have one. But what I want you to see is these are each year, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then what we're looking at for 21. We're budgeting for 21. If you're looking at the screen, the far left is the church's budgeted income. The next bar is what the actual income was that year. And then the next bar is what our actual expenses were. And then you can see what the last bar, the yellow bar, is what we had budgeted for our expenses to be. So what it's encouraging for us, for me as I look at that, is and again, this isn't just for 2020, but this is again, just a trajectory of where things have been for a while. We budget our income, and we budget a slight, modest increase each year is what we're budgeting for. But if you notice that second bar, the orange bar, our actual income is substantially higher than what we budget our income to be. And then you take a look at our expenses. Now we budget our expenses, which is the yellow one. You can see we budget our expenses always beneath what our budgeted income is. We never budget right up to where we think our income is going to be. We never budget above our income. We are always seeking to live beneath our means, and you see that. Now our expenses sometimes are going close to it and sometimes have to go higher. That is regards to some actual extra expenses that we weren't expecting that year, some extra things that came along that we had to tap into some of the extra funds. But you can see that each year our expenses are well beneath our actual income. Those two middle lines, the orange and the gray, the orange is our actual income and the gray is our actual expenses. So you can see that each year we're beneath our expenses, or we're beneath our income, and our income is substantially higher than what we budget our income. And again, this year, we'll get to this when we get to 21. This year, our budgeted income is a slight increase from the years past. Once again, we're not trying to overshoot what we're trying to see, but we're just trusting God, and we're just hoping that God's going to be faithful to even exceed what we're budgeting for, and we go from there. We did see a slight decrease in our giving in 2020. You can see that the blue graph is where we budgeted, and the orange is where we are as far as actual. But again, look at the gray graph, our actual expenses. We cut back on expenses pretty substantially to make sure that we're not living outside of our means and not doing anything that we would get ourselves into any kind of trouble. We did that in a number of different ways. One of the things that many of you know, that we've been trying to pay off our mortgage as fast as possible. We pay over and above on our mortgage every month. We budget that. During these months of coronavirus in the midst of the pandemic, we scaled back to just doing our actual needed payments instead of the above and beyond payments to the mortgage, because we weren't sure where we were going to be. We're actually anticipating being able to pay all that back into the principal of our mortgage to be able to keep on track with where we need to be to pay off, and I'll get to that in a second. But I just show that to you because I feel like this is just another case of God's faithfulness. And just, Brooke, to your point, it says, 2020 was a yucky year for a lot of reasons, but God has been faithful. God's been faithful and has been able to meet our needs financially as well as relationally, and so that's just a really, really good thing. We are scheduled to pay off our mortgage by next June or July. 21, June or July, the mortgage on this campus will be down to zero based on all this stuff. Yeah. So we'll get more on that in a second as well. So that's awesome. One of the things we're also able to do, Dorsey, you want to show this other slide? We're continuing trying to increase what we're giving outside of the walls of the church. To model a generosity in giving out. So these three graphs, they kind of put together on the bottom graph, but the top two graphs is of our budgeted income, what percentage of our budgeted income is giving away outside the walls of the church. That first line, 2015, is a little skewed because of some other numbers and stuff, so won't get into that. But if you just look at, with the exception of one quick little dip in 17 and 18, our trajectory is to continue to increase that as we go. And then again, in the actual income is the far right, the orange slides there, and then you can see that combined in the bottom. I only show that to you because one of the things that we are committed to doing is to be a blessing, to use our campus as a blessing, to use our finances as a blessing, to use our resources as a blessing. We feel like God is blessing us here, and part of the reason that he does that, both individually and collectively, is to use us as an agent of blessing to people around. So we're seeking to do that in increasing ways by giving resources away, by sponsoring more cross-cultural missions work, by doing stuff with Our Daily Bread Soup Kitchen and other ministries in the area. And so we're seeking to eventually get ourselves to where we're 10% or more of our income is being spent outside of the walls of the church. And we just feel like that's a biblical principle, and we want to honor that, and we want to work our way towards that. We're not there yet, We got some growing to go, but we're on trajectory. We're on track to do it. So we're just over 7 in our budgeted expenses this year. We're just over 7% of our income is what we're sending out of the walls of the church. So it could be more based on a couple different things. Let me show you the one last graph on 2020, and that's the mortgage. This is confusing a lot of times, so let me try to explain it. That top line is where in 19 where it was. So if you look at the graph in the far upper left-hand corner, that's where January of 19 the mortgage was. And then December of 19 is that top line is at the bottom right-hand, I'm not explaining. This is why I need a laser pointer. Top line is 19. So you see it start on the top left and it goes down. That's 19. And then if you were to draw a straight line from the bottom of that top line across back over to that middle line, that's where January of 2020 it started budgeted-wise. And then what it actually is the bottom line, the actual bottom line. And you can see down the very bottom right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner, that's where 2020, our mortgage balance is. And if I look at it right, it is just under $100,000. Is that about right, Christy? Yeah, just under. So in next year's graph, you draw that line in the bottom right-hand corner, draw a straight line across to the left, and that will just dip down, and you can see based on the trajectory, in June or July of 21, that line will be at 0 and will be all the way paid off. That's how quickly, and that the reason why it's beneath the projected is because we've been paying over on our principal, and many of you give your tithes and offerings, and then in addition to your tithe and offering, you give specifically towards the mortgage payment to pay it off. So that is how we're able to pay that off as quickly as we are. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. How about questions? Oh, I got one more thing before I answer questions. One of the things we've been able to do in 2020 is to really be able to do some special projects throughout the pandemic kind of season. Many of you guys know this, but historically the church has always run to the issues. When there's been a pandemic historically, if you just look back on the church history, when there's a big issue in the world, and if there's a flood or if there's an earthquake or there's a health crisis or something else, the church, the people of God, have typically run to those issues to seek to be agents of healing and restoration in those places. And Crossroads has done that marvelously in 2020. Our Learning Tree Daycare transitioned from a regular daycare to a pandemic center to provide child care for frontline workers while they had to still continue to go to work. Hospital workers, food workers, those people. So while they were going to work, we provided a safe place for their kids to be, and we transitioned there pretty easily. Over the summer, we spent or did a full day at Soldiers of Honor and painting the upstairs and getting that ready so they can continue their ministry with at-risk kids in the Lima area and to continue to provide that kind of service. And so we continue to do that. We're able, obviously, we did the car wash for the Heart to Honduras and give finances to our friends down in Honduras who are needing to bring relief, financial relief and food relief to people that are hit the hardest from the pandemic. We did that. We did recently, obviously, we did the school project we just wrapped up, and we're getting ready to do Angel Tree and some other things. And we're just continually to find ways to be about the solution and about bringing hope. Cheryl, a lot of what you were saying, instead of thinking about what's going on here, lift up our eyes. We've said this before, but oftentimes the best way when you're feeling down about yourself, a lot of the best way to get out of that is to lift your eyes up off of yourself, find someone in need, and go do something for them. And we've done that in 2020, time and time again. You have done that, and God has blessed that, and God has been really good. So, questions about where we've been or anything else that you want to ask me before I slide into the next 21 stuff? Or anybody online, you can ask me something too. Good question. Cheryl asked, where are we at with regards to the doors we had last year, if you remember the year-end offering towards the security of the daycare and that kind of stuff. So there's a couple of things that are going on. First of all, if you come in the back doors over here where we call it the daycare entrance, but it's this entrance. Hey, Doug, what direction is that? That would be Southeast. We like to call that the southeast entrance. That's where that is. But if you come in that direction, those doors now have locking doors, and so during the day, during the early morning when kids are first coming, those doors are open. People can come and go. But during the day, those are electronically locked in, and somebody has to buzz you in, and they slows down that traffic. Our front doors are locked as well during the day. The doors that we're going to insert into these hallways to have that and to be a little bit more added level of security. We've run into one hiccup, but we should be able to jump over that hurdle pretty soon and be able to insert doors on this side. And the idea is to flip these doors around, but the issues are coming into fire exit and stuff like that. How often? So we may be able to get around that a little bit. We're working on that, but I would say soon you should be seeing at least some new construction of doors over on this side. But we've already got the alarm doors on that, or the buzz-in doors here. We already also have a full alarm system for the campus, new cameras that are way better than the cameras we had before, that are security cameras that get a good aspect of the parking lot as well as all throughout the campus, inside and outside the building. So the actual physical new doors, we just got to wait for one or two things to jump those hurdles and be ready for it. So you should see them soon. Another question. All right. Jake, do I have anything back there? No. Okay. Perfect. Well, then we'll move on to the next thing. So I want to give you a preview of where we feel like God is moving us in 21. What we feel like God is doing here. And really simply, kind of exciting, but I'll simplify it real simple for you. I'm in a conversation with the Church of God statewide and a little bit of kind of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And I'm in conversations with those state pastors and other pastors in our region to talk about how do we help churches be places of really helping people become better disciples of Jesus, or to use our language, to be better apprentices of Jesus. And so I'm in these conversations regularly, once a month now. I'm in these conversations, and we're trying to understand how do we harness what's going on in the church and help the whole church focus around this aspect of apprenticeship, or around the aspect of discipleship. And one of the things that I've been challenged by, is to create a really succinct, carefully planned out kind of understanding of a pathway with someone who is outside of the church. If they are, let's say there's somebody outside the church and they don't know Jesus and they're not really all that interested, what does it look like for them to move from outside of the church to start coming to be a part of what's going on in the church and move down the path of apprenticeship, or down the path of discipleship, moving towards Jesus? What do those markers look like? What does it look like for us to do? And so we've come up with, or we've kind of, the work in progress as it goes from here, is to come up with these four aspects, four kind of modules, if you will, that helps people move down the pathway towards Jesus, towards discipleship, or towards apprenticeship. And these are kind of, they're not linear, like you have to do A, then B, then C, then D, because people usually don't grow that way, right? But trying to understand, especially in 2020, how COVID-19 has changed how we understand the church, how we understand how we can gather as the church, all that kind of stuff. And so trying to understand this pretty well. So what we've come up with is four different little steps, if you will, four different modules, if you will, that kind of helps people lead to it. We're in the midst of this series called Called, where we're working through the framework of formation, and we talk about covenant partnership, right? The 9 practices of people who covenant together, to partner together with the Holy Spirit to see our lives become more like Christ as apprentices. But it seems to me that someone's going to take a step before they become the covenant partner, right? Somebody who's way out there is going to take a step or two before they become a covenant partner. So we've kind of got 4 different aspects. Covenant partnership is the last one. The first one, and here's the little diagram we've got, and this is a work in progress. This is not perfect. But what we have is the first one would be campuses. This campus, and then there's an online campus. So the idea is that somebody would come, and that's where the arrow, somebody's coming into one of those campuses, either here or online, and they interact with somebody. They get to know people. They're inspired by the worship. They're inspired by the teaching and those things that are going on. And then from the campus, they may be invited to some kind of compassion project. We just wrapped up the one with the teachers and staff. We're getting ready to go into Angel Tree. There'll be another one in January or February. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But there'll be an aspect to do some kind of compassion project. And then from there, you're invited. Someone would be invited to come and be a part of some kind of community. The men just had a bonfire last night, and the women will be getting together again, or a life group or some other aspect to begin the process of getting to know each other. And finally, those things all kind of circle around the aspect of covenant partnership. Finally, we'd invite people to take the step of becoming a covenant partner. And many of you have already taken that step to become a covenant partner, and what that means, and that we covenant together, we agree together for these practices to shape ourselves into Christ's likeness. But the idea here is that at any one of those things, so for instance, if someone were going to do the compassion project, this is something that you don't have to be present in person to be able to be a part of. This is the aspect of these hybrid courses, or these classes where they're hybrid. You can do it online and in person. And so it's an aspect of being able to do that. So the 4 things that we're trying to do is to develop these campuses really well. Develop this campus really well to suit the needs of our church. Develop the online campus to be a viable place for people to gather so that they can feel like they're a part of stuff. And then to create these compassion, or to have these compassion elements, these projects that we can do and invite people to be a part of. So if you've got somebody, so for Angel Tree, for instance, is coming up, and you know somebody that maybe you work with, they say, hey, my church is doing this Angel Tree project. Would you want to jump in with us and join us and do this compassion project? You may want to invite them to be a part of it. They may start being a part of the church because they started serving at Spread the Bread and Thread, or because they started serving at the Angel Tree stuff, or another one of the compassion projects. That's why it's not like an A, B, C, D. They may start coming to be a part of the orbit of Crossroads because they were a part of a compassion project. Maybe in the community thing. Maybe you invite them to come to a women's gathering, or one of the young adult gatherings, or your life group, or something else. And so those things, but they're all orbiting around this idea that we are inviting people to be covenant partners and to grow in our life with Christ because of that. So those are the 4 kind of things we're going to try and do. And we're going to try and do this pretty well. We'll develop these viable campuses, both online and in present, and a real in-person kind of stuff. Develop these compassion projects where someone who's online can be a part of that. This is one of those weird things, right? But we don't want our online family to feel like because they're not in person, they can't be a part of what we're doing. Because of whatever reason that they're needing to be distanced online, that they're somehow not a part of what's going on here. We want them to know that they're always a part of what's going on. So when the compassion project comes up, there's some way for them to participate with it. And we go from there. If there's a community project, it's somehow to get involved, you'd be a part of a book study that's coming up. We did the Great Divorce book study this past summer. It was fantastic. And it was all online, right? And so to find a way for people that are online to experience some level of community as well as the community that's gathered in person. So those are the 4 things, if you think about it, we're kind of a pathways we kind of come along. Campus, there's a compassion project, there's some community, and then we're inviting people to take the step of becoming a covenant partner and to agree with one another these 9 practices of formation. Let me go from there. And we've kind of got some things in our budget that are going to go around those things. One of the things we talk about when we talk about campuses, part of our budget is to kind of make sure that the online campus is a viable, good campus. That all the technical issues we have to work out, and all the equipment we have to buy and get all those things, so that the online presence doesn't feel like it's a second-rate presence, that's not as good. Or the classes that we need to do, so the other cameras and microphones and televisions that we need to make these classrooms and make these classes viable for a hybrid kind of experience, we need to make sure that we get those. So our budget reflects some of that. Our budget reflects being able to spend into our campus, both online campus and our physical present campus, just in here, to make sure that we have a viable and a safe place for people to gather and for these meetings and for groups and go from there. But we're also going to have compassion things, whether it's providing lunch for the teachers or doing some other thing where the church is going to spend more of our budget. Again, we're just over 7%, but that was reflective of how do we give out to the community around us. So it's not just spending money in-house here, but how do we give out and how do we do more? So our budget reflects that. Our budget reflects that. Community groups. What does it look like to have life groups and men's groups and other courses where people can meet together? Well, our budget reflects some of that. To be able to put money and resources to help do those things. Then, of course, covenant partnership, we're trying to do that as well, to help lead people towards these practices. But each of these practices, just think of the 6 that we've talked about so far. We'll get to the other 3 starting next Sunday. But these last 6 practices, these things that we need to do, well, there's some things our budget needs to reflect of that. What about cross-cultural stuff? How do we're going to send a team to Uganda in 21. So what does that look like for the church to spend some resources there to give out to that kind of stuff? What does it mean to have a service project downtown Lyman? We did the painting thing with Soldiers of Honor. Can we do more of that kind of stuff? Well, that means the church has to spend some of our resources. So our budget reflects that kind of heart. So these 4 aspects of the church, these campus and then compassion, community, and covenant partnership, and leading people down that pathway and that kind of getting people into that orbit, our budget reflects all that stuff. Obviously well beneath what we're projecting our budgeted income to be, so we're living well under our means. But that's what we're trying to do. That's where we're trying to go. In that little packet, that little booklet thing, I do need to tell you that one of the back last pages is the treasurer's report. And most of our things that in the treasurer's report, I can't say that, good grief. Most of the things in there are pretty broad, and if you are curious about a very, very specific issue about our budget, our books are always open books. You can always come in and take a look at where we're at each week by week if you want to look at that. If you want to look at some specific things, you can look at that as well. But we can kind of go from there. Most of our budget, to be honest with you, most of our budget is pretty similar to where the last previous budgets, with those notable exceptions I just mentioned about investing in some of the resources to make the campuses more viable, investing in the resources to make the compassion projects more viable, and to make sure that we're doing things as best we can to spend outside the walls. Again, we're just, I think it's 7.1%. Of our budgeted income is being spent outside the walls this year. So we're hoping to do that as well. We're also looking at this campus. Many of you were here last year at the Vision Night, and we talked about repurposing and rediagramming this campus. We knew that the end was coming to this mortgage, and we thought, what is it going to look like for us to push forward into this on this campus? What does it look like to move around and to think about future 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? What does our campus need to do, and how do we position it well to serve the community well? And so we still have those drawings. We still have plans on extending and renovating this campus. Will be, if you're out in the lobby, there's pictures and the diagrams of kind of what we've drawn up and to be a part. But to kind of give you a snapshot of it, Cheryl was talking about these doors. That's the first aspect of it, to create doors here that would kind of separate this half of the worships, or this half of the campus, all the classrooms and everything down here, to be separated out, to be really safe and secure for the Learning Tree daycare. This worship center would transition to become a sanctuary worship center primarily. It wouldn't be a gymnasium primarily during the week and a worship center on the weekend, but it would primarily be a worship center. We'd have a new multi-purpose gymnasium that would be built out into the field out there. We'd increase, have more adult classrooms with larger space so that we can spread out. All of them would have smart televisions and have capabilities of being hybrid courses and being able to be a part of that as well, so that we can accommodate the various changes we need to do. So if you want to look at those building plans, we are still planning on doing that. COVID has kind of thrown a curveball on that and the timing of it, but we're still planning on moving forward and not staying back on our heels, but moving forward. We're committed to leading through this and not sitting back and waiting until it happens to be done to start up our plans. It just might mean that instead of doing things right now, we got to wait 6 or 7 months. Our plan is to still move forward with all that plans ahead of time. Fair enough? One more thing I'll tell you before I get to questions about where we're going in 21, and that is our year-end offering. We've been taking a year-end offering for the last 5 or 6 years, and a year-end offering goes to above and beyond projects, things that are outside of the normal operating budget of our church, projects that we feel like needs to happen, but feels like maybe is the right timing to happen, but kind of stand outside of a typical operating budget kind of stuff. And so what we've decided this year, and as always, 10% of whatever comes in is given directly away. And so we're going to do that again this year. But we're going to separate it. We're going to split it into 2 different aspects of ministry. And then again, that 10% at least is going to go away. The first aspect is out in, what direction is that, Doug? East, in what we like to call the east section of our campus. Is the playground area, and that play structure is in really bad disrepair. There's things that are falling off of it at times, and our learning tree and our children's ministry and the kids that come and use our campus need a safe playground to play on. They just need it to be safe. They need it to be viable for them, and so we are the first part of our project. We're going to get one of those. That is the project. That's actually what we're hoping to get. And so it'll replace that whole big wood. The swings will still be out there. We're really hoping, quite honestly, to get a death merry-go-round. Remember those things to get going and get things? Yes. Get one of those things. They're like metal, right? Good grief. What's up with this plastic stuff? Like a metal slide where you burn your butt off when you're sliding down it in the middle of summer. Get one of those things out there. Kids have it too soft out there. But no, just kidding. We'll get one of these things as our plan. And so there's a couple different pictures of it. That's the first project that we're trying to do. Second project is going to be very similar to what we did last year, but we're just noticing, again, with 2020 being the challenging year that it has been, mental health issues are large and they're looming. In particular, mental health issues for some of our children we're seeing increased issues. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to provide 1 day, perhaps 2 days a week, specifically for our kids, starting in the daycare and even for the Crossroads kids, to be able to come, and there will be a person on our campus, a mental health expert on our campus, to provide mental health assessments, help, classes, courses, training, of our teachers that are here in person, so they can be able to be better suited to help the kids, but also the kids that we would designate a room 1 or 2 days a week that we'd have a mental health professional here on our campus to be able to provide that for our kids. Again, the Learning Tree as well as Crossroads kids. And you can just sign up your kids. Hey, look, after school, it would be like at 3:30 or something. You either bring your kid here, or if they're here in the Learning Tree, they just go right into that one classroom, and they're able to get the mental health. Now, you don't call it mental health when you're a little kid, right? It's just like it's a play group or something, but it's creative. But our friends at Cornerstone of Hope have got some stuff, and we're going to meet with them, and they're excited to be on our campus at least 1 day a week, and we'll see where it goes from there. But that's part of the resource of that. What we want to do, we're just going to make it free. We're just going to make it free. The kids that are here in the Learning Tree and their parents that have to pay for their tuition to come here and do all this stuff, we're just going to say, we want your kids to be healthy, and we're just going to serve you. And so we're just going to do it. We're going to provide it. And so for those classes and those kids, our year-end offering is going to go to provide free mental health stuff especially for the kids, some with the teachers to help them transition well with the teachers, and then as well give some training and equipping for parents as well. We've had a number of you guys have been a part of those workshops that we've done on our campus through Cornerstone of Hope, whether it's for you as a parent or as a worker or teacher or even kids. We'll have those as well this next year to help in the ongoing issues with regards to mental health and being able to be good or good, strong people through the whole issues that we're finding ourselves. So those are the two main things. 10% is going to go to our friends in Heart to Honduras. And so we're going to give another 10% of whatever comes in is going to go to our friends down at Heart to Honduras and help them with the ongoing relief effort that they are doing and various issues when it relates to travel and food and other projects that they're doing down there. All right, there's a mouthful, a ton of things I've just rattled off for you, but questions on regards to either budget, regards to year-end offering, where we are with other things? Anything else? Good question. She asked, "Is there an age limit on the children for the mental health thing?" We're gonna start it at like school age, like elementary age, is where we're gonna start it from. For the on-campus stuff, for the workshops that we bring in throughout the year, we'll bring probably one or two more this year. Those tend to be either for adults or for older kids as well. We just had one that was just for us as adults thinking about working through pandemic stuff, and it's just as well done. It was very well done. So we'll be hosting at least a couple more of those as well. Other questions on yeah. Oh, it's like I planted that in you. So yes, Gina wonderfully asked, do we have a goal for the year-end offering for what we're trying? Yes, our goal is $35,000. $35,000. 10% of that, $3,500 at least, would go directly towards Heart to Honduras. A large chunk would go to that slide playground equipment. Will go over there, and then another large chunk will go towards paying so this mental health stuff is free. Yes. Yeah, good question. So Brooke's question was, are we paying the mental health person's salary, or are we paying the kids' portion and stuff? So how they typically work is, if you were going to go and you were going to take these classes, they have these like group therapy kind of stuff, but they're classes that they do. And so if you're going to do that, if your kid was going to be enrolled in it, it would cost you like $100, right, for like 5 or 6 weeks. Well, we're just going to pay it. So we'll pay the kids' fee, tuition, to get into that group, and obviously their salaries and stuff come out of that. That's how they get their stuff. So we'll do that, and we're still in the negotiation factor as far as, is it 1 day a week? Is it 2 days a week? Are they able to do one group therapy? Are they able to do 2 group therapies? How does that play out? So the deal would be, we would just pay the tuition for the kid to go in, and then any of those extra workshops that we have to provide, we'll either provide them at no cost or at very little cost. Typically, those could be anywhere between $50 and $75 a person, and we might be able to do them for $20 or something like that. So, any other questions? Budget-wise, next year-wise, campuses, all that kind of stuff. All right. Either I was really clear, or you just don't want to ask me right now. I'll get emails tomorrow. Yeah? Yeah, Doug. Yes. Yes, good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah, Doug was just saying, for online people, Doug was just saying that the locks themselves for the worship center doors that need to be changed to keep this safe and lockable, those are already been ordered. Those are already going. So again, you'll be able to see those changes, those moves pretty quickly. So it's good. Thanks, Doug. Well, one of the things that we need to do, unless there's another question, I don't want to rush you out, but I want to make sure you get the questions. All right. One of the things that we do when we gather in these is we vote to affirm, as a congregation. We need to affirm both what we're trying to do budget-wise, as well as some new elders, some new leaders in our elder board. So Amber Shade and Carla Gibson are stepping off of the elder board, and we've asked Dave Mooney and Jeff Hunt to replace them, and to although you're irreplaceable, it's got it. But Jeff and Dave have agreed to step into that term. Those elder terms last for 3 years, You serve a 3-year term, and then at the end of that, you're required by our bylaws to take at least a year off, and you're not able to serve a repetitive term unless some extenuating circumstances come up. And so we've asked them to step into leadership there, and both have been around the church for a number of years, served in a number of capacities, and so we're excited to have them come in and be a part of that. We do need to affirm them, and so we're going to pass out ballots here in just a second. Amber, do you have those, or is somebody else going to hand? Carla does? Oh, Matt does. All right, let's go ahead and start handing those out. Matt, if you would. So, okay, oh, way to enlist Ben right away. So what they're going to do is they're going to hand out a little piece of paper, and what we're asking you to do is for two things. You're going to vote on affirming, or if you don't want to affirm, just say you know. But we're looking to affirm the budget, where we're going budget-wise, as you see the graph as far as what our budgeted income and where our budgeted expenses are. And then also to affirm these two new elders to serve a 3-year elder term. Our elders, I believe that there are 7 of us as of right now, and there will be 7 again when these guys step in, and we go from there. We have a wide range of both men and women on the elder board, younger and seasoned people on the elder board. So we have a good mix and a good range there. Our elders are a good spot there. Amber's got a few things as a chairperson of our elder board, and last thing before she retires from the elder board, she's got to say before we officially vote and affirm that. So, Amber, it's all you. You're welcome. I'm going to get water.
While I'm going through these, if you came tonight wanting to vote, there's a sheet on the west side of this room if you want to go and sign that now so that it qualifies. All right, the voting rights. Persons attending Crossroads Church shall have the right to vote as provided in these bylaws if they meet all of the following conditions. They shall be 18 years of age or older. They shall have worshiped regularly within our congregation for a period of at least 6 months immediately preceding any meeting at which they exercise rights of voting. The elders may be a 3/4 majority vote, waive this requirement on an individual basis. During the 6 months, they shall have lived their life in accordance with the teachings of Jesus Christ. They shall conscientiously support the ministry of Crossroads Church with their spiritual gifts and resources. The elder board may remove from the registered voters any person who does not meet the requirements of Section 1. All persons meeting the requirements of Section 1 of this article who are unable because of working hours, sickness, or death of a relative, or any other valid reason to be present in any regular or special business meeting may obtain an absentee ballot prior to that meeting. This ballot must be signed and sealed and put into the hands of the association secretary not later than the time of voting. All voting members attending a business meeting will sign an attendance roster. The names of all voting members shall be kept in a permanent register in the church office. And these are going to be the names of those who have filled out the absentee ballot. Mike Johns, April Johns, Marcia Evilsizer, Jacob Elrod, Randy Napier, Nate Bowers, Kevin Robertson, Judy Robertson, Stan Stevens, and Brenda Bowersock. And these are the names of those present tonight. Cheryl Martin, Bonnie Oatman, Barb Ernest, Dave Ernest, Vicki Gillen, Tim Martin, Denise Mooney, Karen Croft, Rexanne Cole, Jason Hinkle, Doris Cole, Elena Herman, Gina Robertson, Jake Klein, Linda Dugan, Bob Gold, Nathan Motter, Janice Rail, myself, Amber Shade, Matt Shade, Bonnie Van Schoik, Wayne Van Schoik, Wanda Bowers, Jenny Sowers, Charlie Rail, Kim Clevenger, Dave Clevenger, Melanie Taylor, Julie Hunt, Jeff Hunt, Ben Lee, Teresa Lee, Tracy Helser, Andrea Stout, Jay Helser, Dave Brownworth, Mike Stout, Katarina Hinkle, Doug Simpson, Shanda Cox, Deb Workman, Carla Gibson, Christy Spencer, Casey Spencer, Rhonda Jika, Tom Jika, Elizabeth Rumschlag, Mike Bierlein, Brooke Hill, and Dave Mooney.
Amber, I was eating a cookie. Good grief. So here's what we need you to do. If you haven't done it already, grab that blue piece of paper, and if you need a pen, and these guys will give you a pen, or it'll magically appear in your hands. Just mark down where you affirm and stuff, and when you're, or if you don't, that's fine too. And then when you're done with that, if you just want to pass them, fold them, and pass them to the centers of your aisles here, and these guys will come pick them up, and they will. We need to have an official count of those from a register standpoint. So if you want to do that, those guys will collect those. Babe, can you give my iPad and my water real fast? Thanks. And while those guys are going to count those over in the office, before they come back and do that, we got one more thing I want to share with you guys as it pertains to just as we move forward through the rest of this year as well as into 21. I should tell you this, that this has been challenging from a leadership perspective, because a lot of things we're trying to figure out what's the best way to go about some of these things, and sometimes you just don't know. You just don't know how the best way to handle it, what's the best thing to do, and that kind of stuff. And so it's been a challenge, as well as just trying to think of just normal things. Like, we just had a conversation as a staff, and you start thinking about, okay, it's November, you start thinking about vision night, you guys start thinking about, not that this is like teaching series, what are we going to teach on, that kind of stuff. And then, well, it comes up pretty quickly. Advent is coming soon. And you start thinking Christmas. And you start thinking, well, oh goodness, we do Christmas Eve services. How are we going to do Christmas Eve services? Our normal Christmas Eve service is one in the afternoon or early evening, and one at 11 o'clock or 11 o'clock that leads up to midnight. But we start thinking, how can we do Christmas Eve services and socially distanced and around like that when we normally have one of the largest crowds that we have in here? So we started thinking all those things, and maybe we have to do a second service or do all these. I mean, it's lots of things in the cooker as we're trying to think about all that stuff. So that's kind of where we're going. But I do have one more thing, as those guys are counting up stuff, one more thing I want to talk through. One of the things that's been coming up occasionally, and it's come up once or twice recently, and I wanted to kind of address it and how we can move forward as a church family, and to just try and address it as directly as I think is possible, and yet as gently as I think is possible as well. And the first thing is that to recognize, with regards to health department orders and recommendations moving forward this winter and into next year and that kind of stuff. And the first one, I just want to remind each one of us, whether we're here or we're online listening, that we're doing everything that we can as a church to keep our facilities cleaning them in between services, to wiping down the counters, to spraying disinfectant, to doing all we can, having the hand sanitizers out, to making sure we're doing that. Those that are serving in the hospitality area are wearing masks and gloves, and those that are serving communion, as we did this morning, are doing through masks and gloves. And while it's not ideal, we're doing what we can to keep the campus as clean as possible. We've been asked to comply with the measures, the added measures to help people stay as safe and slow the spread, to keep people as distant as we can. So we continue to set these chairs up with some breaks in them so that you can have some space between you and the people next to you. And we're going to continue to do that in the fall. We're not going to go back on those things. We're going to continue to provide those kind of safety measures to the best of our ability for all of you and anybody else that's coming. But secondly, we can encourage everybody during this winter season and during the next spring and into the next year to continue to give financially to support the ministry of the church. As you saw in 2020, there was a dip down in giving, not drastically to where we got hurt because our expenses dropped down as well, but we want to continue to trust Jesus with everything that we are, and that includes our finances. And so we want to continue to encourage people, wherever you are in your spiritual life with God, to continue to be faithful in giving of your financial resources to the work of God, as particularly through the ministries of Crossroads. And again, we want to continue to grow in that area. As a church, we're seeking to grow more, and we're asking our people, you guys, to continue to grow more as well, to increase during the season of pandemic, not to sit back and wait until it's done, but to increase and to move and to lead through this. But that depends on the faithfulness and the generosity of every Crossroadian to be faithful in the giving of our tithes and our offerings in the midst of it. This is a season, this pandemic season isn't going to be over in a blink of an eye. So it's a time for us to walk towards people as an organization, to serve, to care, to give towards people, to love people well. But that's going to be real dependent on the financial giving of Crossroadians. So let's be faithful in that in this next coming year. Third thing, let me just speak a moment about what it means to be known by love. We're going to talk about that portion of our mission statement starting this Sunday and leading for the next few weeks. We've talked about it being a place where we are learning to live by faith and transmitting hope. And now we're going to look at what it means to be known by love. And I don't want to steal all of the thunder for the next 3 sermons here in the next 6 minutes as I'm talking about it. But when we talk about known by love, we're talking about recognizing the dignity in another person, which leads me to sacrificially serve them. When I recognize the dignity in another person, and we selflessly sacrifice for them on their behalf, for them, for their well-being. And part of the beauty of being known by love, and we talked about this morning, about the centrality of cross-cultural diversity and everything at the cross. Part of the aspect of being known by love is this aspect that we see people that are different than us, and we recognize the dignity in them, even though they differ from us, and we walk towards them. We're different in our socioeconomic status. We're different in our political views. We're different in our culture and our backgrounds. We're different in all those areas. But one of the things that unites us and sets us apart from the culture at large is, though we are different and though we have various opinions of various things, we have a radical commitment to love one another through all of our differences, to recognize the dignity in another person. Biblical love recognizes that dignity and leads us to compassion and heartfelt moving towards them, to put their needs ahead of my own needs, to make myself maybe even a little uncomfortable in order to help them be more at ease and more comfortable. And it seems to me, as I think about our culture, as I look out in the world at large, it seems to me that one of the downsides to the political world that we live in, the COVID-19 world that we live in, is that when there are people on different sides of the opinion or different sides of the issue, it's so easy to characterize the other person and to belittle them and to talk negatively about them as if they are uninformed or anything else. People are on either side of the opinion, and they are quick to name call, quick to write nasty notes or posts about them on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, easily to demoralize those who think differently than them. See, that's what's going on in the culture at large. That's what's happening out there when people are disagreeing on things, and they're so quick to lob verbal grenades at one another. But that's not the way it should be in the church. It's not the way it should be here. That's the university or the culture at large. Unity is not in diversity. It's not happening at all. There's unity as long as we all agree on the same things. There's unity in opinion. Whenever there's unity in opinion, we all get along really well. But the church is to be different. The church is to be different. We are to be known for the way in which we love each other. We see dignity in each other. especially when we disagree, especially when we're on polar opposites sides of the issue. Whatever issue it is, we learn to love each other through it and not to think negatively or only think of a characterization of somebody else or to lump them in or anything else, but to walk towards them and to love them well. The early church dealt with some of this stuff early on. There were quarreling, there were issues that were surrounded that threatened their unity. And these issues were surrounding about the types of foods that they were able to eat or this kind of holy days that they were supposed to adhere to. But the Apostle Paul gives them some pretty strict instructions regarding this maturity and unity as in the faith as they're growing towards one another in the body of Christ. The Apostle Paul gives them some pretty strict instructions about what it looks like to be people of unity when there's diverse opinions about what's right to eat or what's not right to eat. When should we have the holy days? When should we not have the holy days? And all these things. And people were bickering and fighting and church splits were happening. And all these people were saying, well, you're not as followers of God as, you're not as strong of a follower of God as we are. And you're backsliding. And all these name calling was going on. And the Apostle Paul heard about it. And he writes a letter and he says, this ought not to be going on in the church because there ought to be unity in the church. And I want to read for you a portion of what the Apostle Paul writes in Romans chapter 14. It's a fantastic chapter, so if you get a chance to read it at your own time, I want you to do that. But Romans chapter 14, I'm just going to read a few verses out of it, and you kind of get the glimpse of it. It starts with this. It says, except the one whose faith is weak without quarreling or over disputable matters. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master, servants stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. And if I slide down to verse 13, he picks it up. He says, therefore, let's stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put a stumbling block or an obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. I'm convinced, being fully persuaded in the Lord Jesus, that nothing is unclean in and of itself, but anyone who regards something as unclean, then for that person it is also unclean. If your brother or sister is distressed because of what you eat, you are no longer acting in love. Do not by your eating destroy someone for whom Christ died. And if I slide all the way down to verse 19, he says this, let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and mutual edification. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. And he goes, is it not better to eat meat or drink wine or to do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to fall? It goes on from there. Here's the main point that Paul's talking about in Romans chapter 14 as it regards to this aspect of quarreling and bickering over these things. Christian community, Christian unity is based on love for one, mutual edification, to help one another out. The response to a brother or a sister who differs from us, who's on an opposite side of the issue than we are, a brother and a sister in the Lord who's given their life to Christ and who's worshiping and alongside us, but's on a different side of the issue than us. The mature response is not to be offended by them, not to cast judgment on them, not to cast judgment on their character or their lack of intelligence. And that's the way the culture does it. That's the way the world out there does it. But Jesus says, not so with you. Not so with you. And you don't bring that toxic culture that's out there, you don't bring that into the church. Paul says maturity in the church means that we do things out of love for one another. Don't put a stumbling block in front of your brother or your sister. So he says, listen, if you think it's okay to eat meat and somebody else thinks it's not okay to eat meat, then don't think judgment on them. Don't pass judgment off of them. But it might mean that you're in a situation with them. That might mean you need to abstain from eating meat in their presence because otherwise you're going to put a stumbling block in front of them. It's more about maturity and unity and love than it is about really eating or what day you're going to worship. And it's about learning to mature yourself towards love for one another. And I want to see that in our church. I want to see that in our church, where brothers and sisters can disagree, can be on different sides of the issue, and can prioritize love for one another. And at the risk of getting too lost in the weeds for a second, let me be kind of specific. And you know my heart in this, I hope you do. But with regards to the CDC guidelines, there are people on both sides of that issue. There are people on both sides of it. And there are many people who are somewhere in the middle. Who are somewhere in the middle. And here's what I'm asking us to do as a church. When you see someone who differs from you, in your perspective, when you see them, whether they're outside the church or they're inside the church, let's heed Paul's instruction here. Not pass judgment on them. And to not pass judgment on them. See, the way of the culture out there, well, it divides us. Either someone is just weak and a sheep and they're just following blindly and they're just, they've been brainwashed into thinking all these kind of guidelines are going to do anything. Or someone on the other side of things is a conspiracy theorist and is not sensitive to anything, and they just think they're throwing caution to the wind and they don't care about anybody. You have these two people, two sides of the issue. And when you go places, as I've gone to places, I've gone to football games and soccer games and out about and shopping and various things, I see some people adhering to the guidelines and some people are not. But what I began to notice even more is you begin to see the way in which people are looking at each other and the disdain and the hostility that are being looked at each other and even the words that are being talked about other people because they're adhering blindly to the foolish things, or they're being insensitive and not even caring about anybody else except themselves, and all this stuff, and people are talking negatively about it, and the issues just go on around. So here's what I'm going to ask. As a church, let's not allow that toxic stuff in the culture to be brought into our church. Let's be known by love in this place. At least that there would be one place where people could come regardless of their sides of the issues, regardless of where they land on the issue. They would come to this place and they would feel welcomed. They'd feel loved. They'd feel not judged. They wouldn't feel like they're being looked at. They wouldn't feel like they're being shunned. At least there would be one place that would be a safe place for people to come and not feel like they're being put off or talked about or looked at. That this campus would feel like it's a safe place where people are really known by love. Really known by love. Because while we are asking people to adhere to the guidelines and all the spacing and the distancing and the hand sanitizing, the mask wearing, and we're doing all that, we're providing the masks for people, we're doing all that as best we possibly can, we also recognize that there are some people that won't. For a whole host of reasons, they may not. They may have asthma, that it's a hard thing for them to do to sit through that stuff. They may have claustrophobia, wearing something for that long of a period of time, or when they're sitting down, they need to take a break and they take their mask off for just a moment. They need to be able to have that space without feeling judged, without feeling like they're second-class citizen. And rather than arguing and being divisive or making people feel judged or less intelligent than what you feel like you are, because wherever they land on that issue may be different than you, what I'm asking each of us to do is to prioritize unity, prioritize love of your neighbor, your brother or sister. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes for them. You don't know the reason that they aren't wearing one or the reason that they have to take it off at times. You don't know all that stuff. So let's practice love in this place. Let's extend mature Christian hospitality to one another. While we differ on sides of the opinions, on the sides of the aisle, we may differ on various things, and many of us may be somewhere in between in the middle. When they come through those doors and they come into this campus, we come from with the diverse opinions about things, diverse comfort levels about how comfortable we are about coming into a large group, and that's fine, and that's great, and I'm okay with all of that. The only thing I'm asking us to do is to heed the Apostle Paul's words and to learn to love one another, to not let these things divide us, and to allow it to kind of be a spur in the side of the flesh where it just kind of makes it hard for people. We just need to learn to do that, learn to walk towards each other. And sometimes that's going to mean I'm going to put myself become less comfortable if I can make a brother or sister more comfortable. It means if I walk over, this happened to me just a couple weeks ago at church. I walked over to someone I don't really know all that well. Sorry. I walked over to someone I don't really know all that well. Someone's fairly new to the church, and I came over to him. I was wearing a mask. That person was wearing a mask, and I reached out my hand to just shake his hand, and they backed up a little bit and said, I'd rather not. I have to keep a little extra space. So that's fine. Now, I really like shaking hands, and I like reaching out to talkatives, and I like reaching out and giving hugs. I like that. But sometimes I'm going to have to put myself less comfortable to make a brother or sister more comfortable. That's maturity in love, to seek their needs more than my needs. And as much as I can, I want to go there. We're going to make it through all this stuff. We really are. We're going to get beyond it and all that kind of stuff. But in the midst of it, let's prioritize love of our neighbor. And let's do that really well. And that includes how we speak about one another, how we treat one another, how we cultivate a culture here. And it starts here. We wanted to talk about this. We talked about this at Elder Team. So when are we going to talk about this? And it felt like the best time was here at Vision Night, because this is like a family meeting, right? And you guys know, my heart. It's not. I'm not trying to bash you on the head or wherever you land on the sides of the issue and all that stuff. We're not doing that. You know me. It's just like a family gathering up and say, hey, there's some things we need to talk about. And so this is the time we talk about those things. So I truly believe this is what Jesus would have us do in this kind of time, to create a culture where the vast majority of people, now there may be some that don't do this because they're wherever they are in their own life, that's fine. But the vast majority for us, that we set the tone of the culture of the church. We set the tone if we're going to be a divisive church or we're going to be a loving-based church. Jesus said, this is how people will know you're my disciples, by the way in which you love one another. And that doesn't always mean that you love those that agree with you all the time, by the way in which you love those when they disagree. This is how they'll know that you're my disciples, Jesus says. So let's demonstrate a different way. As it regards to the guidelines, as it regards to everything else, let's walk through this together. Let's lead through it well, but it's going to take every one of us to maintain that kind of culture, to grow in that way, and go from there. Hope that makes sense to you. Hope that makes sense. Amber, do you have a list of everything, or have we affirmed the budget? Yes. Dave? It's close, Dave. It's close, Dave. It's close. Jeff? Good. Jeff is affirmed. Dave is affirmed. Budget is affirmed. Make that as a official thing in our minutes and go from there. And let me pray for our church family. Then Jason's going to help us and lead through our closing song to kind of send us out. But let me pray for our church family and for all of us gathered and those that are still streaming online, and then we'll go from there. Jesus, we are humbled by you and your grace in our life. We thank you that you've been faithful to us, faithful financially to meet our needs, faithful to allow us to meet the needs of others, that you've allowed us to meet in this place, that you haven't sent us out where we can't gather anymore. Father, we are honored and glorify you for all that. And we've struggled through 2020, but we recognize your hand even in a year like that. We look forward to 21. We look forward to what you're doing. Lord, we pray for the year-end offering. We pray that finances would come in, that we would be generous, that we would be faithful, that we would give of our resources to the calling that you have on this church, that we would be a place that doesn't sit back, but is actively looking to make apprentices of you. And that as we apprentice ourselves to you, that we would mature in our spiritual life, that we would be known by love, recognizing the dignity of each person, leading us to sacrificially serve them. And may we, even when we're uncomfortable, may we make allowances for others that they would be comfortable, that this campus would be a warm, welcoming, comfortable campus for people to come to hear the dangerous message of your son Jesus and what he's done for us and how it leads us to eternal life. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Let's stand as we sing of God's faithfulness, no matter what happens in this life. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness, thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Beginning to end, my life in your hands. Great is your faithfulness. You never let go. There's one thing I know. Great is your faithfulness. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth. Thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings are mine with 10,000 beside. Beginning to end, my life in your hands. Great is your faithfulness. You never let go. There's one thing I know. Great is your faithfulness. Beginning to end, my life in your hands. Great is your faithfulness. You never let go. There's one thing I know. Great is your faithfulness. Oh, great is your faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Well, thanks for being here. It's been good to just have a good family meeting kind of stuff together. It's good reminders of what God is doing in and through us. So one last thing to let you know, when you're walking out, there's a bunch of cookies out there. So if you want to grab like 1,000 of them, please do, because we don't want to we'll be munching on them all week otherwise. So grab them for your family, do that kind of stuff. But thanks for coming tonight. Stick around if you want to, fellowship a little bit if you want to do that, but you're welcome to be dismissed now and enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you guys real soon. Thanks.